Oops. Hey guys. I'm back again 2 times in one day. What? It's because it's important and because the last conversation was so uncomfortable, but this one will be more comfortable for me anyway. Listen, I know that on the older videos, I talk about Dr. Schulenberg a lot. And now that even I know the case file better, I want to come back and talk to you guys about it some more. And I'm going to read from the actual script, just like I did with the Kornfelds. And that way we can, I can discuss like I did with the Kornfelds, what the deal was. But I wanted to read you guys something first on the Kornfelds. I think it was Detective Hastings before I go into Dr. Schulenberg, you guys. Sorry, I have to get used to opening this on the side computer. Hold on, I'm looking for something. I want to say it was Hastings, Detective Hastings, that in his file says, let me just double check. I'm reading something because one of the people walks up to, oh, here it is. It is Detective Adam Hastings, you guys. And in his file, on line 10, he says this. He says, I then made contact with Kornfeld. I asked Kornfeld if he'd be willing to talk to me about how he knew about the incident. See how they call it the incident? But anyway, Kornfeld stated he would. I activated my digital recorder again. The following is a summary of the recording with Kornfeld. First of all, we never hear any recordings in the file, just saying. But listen, number 11, he says, I identified Kornfeld and expressed my condolences to Kornfeld. I asked Kornfeld how he knew Nelson. Kornfeld stated he did not know Nelson. Not Prince Rogers Nelson, just Nelson. Okay, how specific is this professional file? I'm just saying. Kornfeld stated he was brought in to help with Nelson's medical issues and some options for getting assistance. Mind you, if that was, Andrew Kornfeld talking, he wouldn't have said that he was brought in to help with the medical options and some options for getting assistance, because we already know from the Kornfeld interview that he said he didn't know why he was there and he brought the drugs in the backpack, yada, yada. So I'm just saying I wanted to touch on that again. And again, it says Kornfeld stated, I know this about Schulenberg, but I didn't get a chance to read this the other day. Kornfeld stated he arrived in Minnesota and got a room in Chanhassen. Kornfeld stated he met with Johnson Bakir and Bakir in the morning hours of 4/21. While he was speaking with them, they mentioned it was normal not to check on Nelson for a while. Kornfeld stated he advised they should attempt to make contact with Nelson, and Kornfeld stated they arrived at Paisley Park about 9:15. Kornfeld stated he was in another room at the residence while Johnson and Bakir went to go check on Nelson. Kornfeld stated he heard a scream and came into the area of the elevator. Now listen, on the other report, if you go back and watch the Kornfeld video, the other Kornfeld, if it were Andrew, he said that when he heard the scream, he just knew in his gut, and that he ran into that part of the building and he didn't know where to tell him he was because he had never been to Paisley Park Studios before. Now this one says when he came into the area of the elevator, we talked about the stain in the carpet and everything else. So just like I put on my Facebook posts and everything else on the Pied Piper and everything, if you guys look at the elevator pictures, like I showed yesterday, the carpet is on the downstairs floor and then it's on the blue floor with the body on it. So that's just proof right there that they moved. So anyway, I wanted to touch on that fact that why would Detective Hastings identify Kornfeld and express his condolences? If he had never met him before, why would he have condolences to express? You know what I'm saying? I know you guys do. Moreover, I want to get to this interview because it really helps to establish, the lies, you guys, that they're trying to perpetrate on us. And it takes me a minute to get this set. I know you guys see some stuff behind me on the board there, but if you didn't catch the other video, the temptation video, it's because I'm not promoting it. It's very personal. And if you're interested, you could definitely watch it. It's important, but probably only to some people. So I want to come back and do something, but I do explain some things on that video about breakdown in the X Center. You might want to check out what's on the board back there in the other video. Pardon me, sorry. Now listen, this is for those people who are investigative fixated. This is ICR number 160-12559, digital statement, Carver County Sheriff's Office, Detective Nelson, 839, and Dr. Michael Todd Schulenberg. What's interesting is in the other files, they call him in the text we looked at yesterday, he says Mike Schulenberg, or he doesn't usually say doctor. He'll say Mike Schulenberg or Schulenberg. So again, the dual names. I'm going to skim, but I'll read to you guys what's important, I promise. It says it's a recorded statement given by Michael Todd Schulenberg on the, he gives his date of birth, answering questions from Detective Nelson, badge 839, 21st, approximately 11:57. Present as a witness during this statement is no one. That's what it says. Again, this is in reference to 160-12559, and correction, it's 10:57. So interesting that he's talking to Schulenberg at 10:57 when we consider the times that they all reported that they left Paisley Park. That'd be really tight times. I'll have to go back and check those out before I say too much about that. So they go through the standard names, Michael Todd Schulenberg, address. I'm going to skim you guys. And now it's important, you know, Nelson says this, okay, you understand you're not under arrest and this is a voluntary statement, correct? Okay, what would you like to be called? Would you like to be called Michael, or Mike's fine? Okay, Mike, I understand you're a doctor or a physician that has, correct, had seen professional contact with the decedent. And Nelson says, okay, the deceased it's Prince, his name, but his real name is Roger Nelson, correct? Even during this file, they do not say Prince Rogers Nelson, hardly ever, only in the one file that is 16-12559 without the 0 in it. They call it the Keep Forever file. Anyway, they say his name is Roger Nelson, right? And again, the birth certificate. Some of this I went over before, but I wasn't as able to get in depth on it. So hopefully it's not redundant. I thought his name, and he's in our electronic record as Prince Rogers Nelson. That's what Schulenberg said. Okay, perfect. So Schulenberg just testified to the fact that he was in their electronic records as Prince Rogers Nelson. But when we go through the file, there's not one file under the name of Prince Rogers Nelson except for the ER file that even, I don't know if that reads Prince Rogers Nelson, the one that was on 10/23/13, where PK says he took Prince to Ridgeview, but then the ambulance report says that he went by ambulance. So there's those discrepancies where he was prescribed the Zofran and vitamin D. Or he was offered the Zofran and vitamin D, but declined, but then those were the CVS pills that he had on his person. So anyway, and then also at the Northview Hospital, they said that they changed the names of Kirk Johnson and Prince Rogers Nelson to Peter Vang and John Pellegrino. So there's no files with the name Prince Rogers Nelson on them. Medical files is what I'm getting at. It's Roger Nelson or the wrong name all the time. The wrong name, wrong ID. You guys get the gist. Okay, perfect. Can you give me a brief history on how you came in contact with him? Sure. Kirk Johnson, who was present this morning, has been a patient of mine for probably 16 years, and last fall contacted me to see if I would be open to helping him with his boss. So every time he says his boss, we know that they're lagging on some information. You know what I mean? Because he's talking about other things. At that point in time, it was just to, see the kind of an idea like doing a physical, getting things checked out. And that's what was shared with me. Nothing ever came to fruition until about 2 weeks ago, April 7th. I received a text message about 5:45 a.m. in the morning. Now, the 16 years I discussed in the PK video, you guys, that is taking us back at that time to the year 2000, which is when Kirk was known to have left the Prince camp to go be a Lifetime Fitness representative from 2000 to 2009, I believe it was. And then when he came back after the Barack Obama concert and started doing tours with Prince again. So initially he contacted Schulenberg, Kirk did, in October, November of 2015. That's what he meant by fall, because that's what the records tell us. So because he had been his doctor for the whole length of that time that he had been a representative at Lifetime Fitness and all those other things, that's interesting to know. And Nelson says, okay. And Schulenberg says, okay, asking if I would be able to help out and potentially administer some IV fluids that day. Okay. So after speaking with Kirk, I came over to Paisley Park about 6:45 in the morning. Okay. Those are the texts that we talked about yesterday. Met Prince, took a history, did what physical exam I could at his house or studio. Yup. And then since he wanted IV fluids, that's not something I could do there. So then we arranged to meet up at office and where's your office located at? 15450 Highway 7. So Kirk brought Prince over. Marone, who is Prince's personal assistant, met us there too. Okay. And just for privacy reasons, we entered through the back of the building and came into the urgency center, which was not open for patient care. Let's remember this was Thursday, April 7th, and 6:45, 7:30, he does a physical, 8 o'clock, 9-ish, you would assume maybe they got to the doctor. But I told you guys before, it's not just the fact that it wasn't open at that time because of the hour. When I did my research on the facility, there's like an urgent care side, and then there was another side that wasn't even open for patient care yet. It was like a part because of all the LLCs and medical centers and things that they were doing. To the best of my research, the other side of the facility wasn't even open for patient care. That's what they're saying, and that's why they use the two back entrances. So just saying. And for privacy, yeah, they came into which was not open and placed an IV, gave him a liter of IV normal saline, and he said he felt better, and then left in the presence of Marone. So that right there is a very strange thing to say with all these, I keep doing that with my arm, with all the paranormal things. He said that he gave the IV and it says this, he said he felt better and then left in the presence of Marone. Like, I don't know, did he take on Marone's presence or countenance? I don't know, you guys. Schulenberg says, let's see, 2 days later, he called me to let me know he was feeling better, that some of the symptoms they discussed on the 7th, or no, I'm sorry, it couldn't be 2 days later, he said. So what happened right there? Because then he says, okay, it was on the 8th. On the 8th? And then so they go on to talk about how Marone texted him at lunch and asked if Prince could talk to him. But then he says that he already had that conversation with Prince. So this is what he says, you guys. So the 8th, Marone texted me at lunch and said, could Prince talk to you? And then about 10 minutes later, Prince called me and I spoke to him on the phone for about 15 minutes. And we just reviewed some of the symptoms, blah, 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 blah. This is what we talked about yesterday. I talked about with the chiropractor, you guys. He said he had seen a chiropractor that night. He was just having some new symptoms, and we just kind of talk about how I offered to see him again and do some blood work. So if he saw him on the 7th, and then on the 21st, he's talking to Nelson here, and he says 2 days after the 7th, which would have been the 9th, but then he says it wasn't the 9th, and then he calls it the 8th because, golly, they don't have cell phones, and they don't know what day it was. But my other point is that, as I showed you guys yesterday, he or whatever the other slideshow video is, he was texting with Kirk around that time. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Back to the Schulenbergs. And then he says this, and this is very telling too. So he says you could do some blood work, but we kind of left it at that. And Nelson says at that. And then my next contact with him was the 21st, yesterday. Okay. Listen, Schulenberg just said his next contact with Prince was the 21st. However, the other testimony has him showing up outside of Paisley Park by coincidence. In the one file, he was just there by coincidence, but the texts tell us that he was bringing over files because they didn't have a text or an email. So he was bringing over the files. However, that doesn't put him in contact with Prince, does it? But here, during this testimony, he says, my next contact with him was on the 21st, yesterday. So this is supposed to be done on the 21st. So why did he say the 21st yesterday? Okay. Why did he say he had contact with him? Okay. Those all leave us to feel like he had contact with him and was maybe there with him overnight, providing that 24-hour care that Kornfeld and Phaedra and everybody had prepared when they had 24-hour in-house doctor care. I'm just saying, you guys, this is what's in their testimony. And I don't know why they can't tell us all the truth in People magazine, but that's what I'm here for. Then I wouldn't be here. So he says, okay, where? And then he's like, where? I got to look at Kirk contacted me. Okay. Schulenberg is saying, by text. And let's see here. Or actually, I had talked to Kirk on, I think, Wednesday. Yes. And then we had talked about having Prince come over for kind of an assessment and maybe some blood work. And on Thursday at 7 p.m. And then it happened actually at 5. Kirk got in touch with me, and then he came. Kirk and Prince came over to the office at 5 p.m. What was that? Go back and listen to it. I'm not going to read it again. What kind of testimony is that, and why are we accepting it? That's exactly what he said verbatim. Okay, so in the interim, Schulenberg says, I had learned from Kirk, who stated to me that he had just learned about this opiate concern that Prince was using, opiates. Opiates? Did he say how much he was using? Kirk didn't know. Right there, Schulenberg establishes that the 18th and 19th, like I talked about on the slideshow video, where Kirk couldn't remember if he saw Prince, and the 18th and 19th, Kim Pratt, the whole thing, that on the 18th, that Kirk was texting Dr. Schulenberg not only to ask if he could come in for an appointment, but Kirk told Schulenberg, see you tomorrow. So that's the interim that he would be talking about, I'm sure, was the 18th and 19th, which was the interim. Kirk didn't know how long he was using the opiates, the naloxone, I'm sure. Anyway, what he told me is that he had been in contact with a lot of people who knew Prince and apparently were aware of this, but Kirk told me he had not been aware of it. Okay. The number, I'm going to skim right here because what they do is they talk about the first time he called, what kind of symptoms he had. And I don't want to be redundant. They talk about some soup that he had eaten. What's important to know on that is Schulenberg says, he was complaining of like numbness and tingling in one of his legs. And I think it was his right leg, numbness and tingling in his hands. And that he had attributed vomiting to the night before, that he had attributed to some soup he had eaten. Now, what's important to know about that is when you read the files, if you're me, then you notice that or maybe it was one of the audios that was on YouTube, I'm not sure, that when I believe it's one of the drivers or Renville Wellington is being interviewed, and Wagner asks him if he ever drove around or picked up did any other stops. And he says no, that he only picked up some ginger soup that night at the 14th at the Fox Theater. So if he attributed whoever the vomiting to some soup, that's probably what they're talking about because Renville had said he picked up some soup that night. And so that's how you figure out the timing, by reading everything. Dig. Okay. Now, also what's important about that is the numbness and tingling, you guys, that they're talking about. Those aren't factors of an addict. Those aren't if you're in withdrawal, yeah, you can have some numbness and tingling and restless legs, but that's, neither here nor there. The patches that were on in the pictures, you can't see them in the picture. You can see the blue wristband, but in the testimony, when I read about the body positions, the new position file, there are white patches on the right leg and on the wrist. So you would have to wonder what those patches were. And everything's relevant. Now, this is where they lapse off into some weird thing, because with the memory lapses that they have, they're talking about the soup, and Chris Nelson says, okay. And then Schulenberg says, I mean, you didn't do any, Schulenberg says, walk around to, yeah, look to see if there was any vomit or, sure, stuff like that. So, and then at any time then at any time, did Prince tell you that he was suffering from, if that's the case, that he was taking opiates or anything like that? You guys, they just lapsed into some kind of thing where they were just talking about, did he see any vomit? Did he walk around to see any vomit? What were they talking about? That's their script. And then it goes ... when they trail off. That's not me. And then, so they go back to saying, did he tell you what he was suffering from? He said, I asked him if he was taking any prescription medications, and I believe he said no. And I asked again if he was taking anything for like the hands, and he said that he had a medication, but he didn't know what it was. Okay, so, and in your time, you didn't prescribe him any new medications or anything like that? I did not prescribe any medications on the 7th. Okay. Yesterday, I prescribed medications to treat opiate withdrawal. So then we go through all that. So then they get in all that, and I don't want to talk about all that again. I want to establish the lies, and I need to skim right here. He says here that they had him come in and place an IV so that they could give another liter of saline. And in the police testimony, I don't know which one it was, the police officer mentioned that Schulenberg said that they had a nurse come in and place an IV. So who was that worst nurse, and why did we never get to hear from her, is a question I have. Now listen, then he says Prince told me that he was taking Tylenol. Okay. This is very important. I asked him, Schulenberg is saying, I asked him if there were any other ingredients in the Tylenol, and I believe he either said no or that he didn't know. You guys, why would Schulenberg ask Prince if there was any other ingredients in the Tylenol, unless he was privy to the information of the amniophenol and Tylenol manufacturing, et cetera, that I mentioned in the video before? He was in on it. He was with them the 18th, 19th, it just is. And then he went on to say in the other file, which I already discussed, if indeed the Tylenol contains other ingredients, then blah, 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 then it could counter affect this whole system of things that somebody might be taking because they're organs were shutting down. Anyway, they go on to talk about opiate withdrawal symptoms, and the silly thing is he prescribes the clonidine, hydroxine, and stuff that they try to pass off as opiate withdrawal medicine, which would never be used for opiate withdrawal medicine. They don't even let you go to rehab unless you're completely clean, and so it's a whole ridiculous thing that they have going on. As to how I ended up at Paisley Park this morning, and then so the story continued. So, we administered the liter of IV fluids. I sent a prescription to Walgreens on 101 and 7 for clonidine, and Kirk left to go pick that up. And Prince did take 2 doses of clonidine before he left the office and 1 dose of hydroxine. So he just said that Kirk left, and also that Prince did take 2 doses of clonidine before he left the office and a dose of hydroxine. So what they try to do there is, with that lying in plain sight, they try to cast that spell where they're calling Kirk and Prince the same person, where he left, and I showed you guys in the slideshow where he has on the furry hood and the Under Armour and everything else. So then they go on to spell the medicines, and I'm not going to do all that. He says that the Prince asked for something to relax, and that which in the clinic we don't do, in the urgency center they do. But I didn't want to make the problem worse. That's what Schulenberg said. Sure, by giving some other type of controlled medication. That would be the Valium they had for vasectomies, and that he prescribed as well. By giving some other type of controlled medication, sure, intravenously in the office, which he said he did on the 7th, and then again on the 14th. But see, the thing is, you guys, they didn't even have an appointment on the 14th because he was supposed to be up in White Bear picking up the prescription from Dr. Boo and then getting on the plane at 2:32 at the Minnesota airport. So come on. Anyway, the doses you gave him were in pill form, blah, blah, blah. He walked out at 6:30 and appeared comfortable. Yeah, comfortable. They went on talking about him being a little dehydrated, which is really random because it cuts right into the testimony. How are you going to talk about them walking out feeling comfortable to his mouth being dehydrated? So I gave him a dose of normal saline, and the harm for that is low. Talk about how they filled the prescriptions, and he says that he knew that he filled the clonidine, but he didn't know about the other two because he emailed one in and the other two probably hand wrote. So neither here nor there. It's not super important. The fact is that they're giving all the prescriptions. And after looking up an opiate withdrawal treatment on the computer, I issued a prescription for Valium. Now, here we have Dr. Michael Schulenberg saying that he looked up opiate withdrawal symptoms on the computer. Yet, we're supposed to believe that Dr. Howard Kornfeld, who runs Recovery Without Walls Specialty Addictions, since that they spoke to Schulenberg on the 20th to provide this life-saving services, but dude is looking up opiate withdrawal symptoms on the computer. It's the little things. And no doctor, nowhere would prescribe Valium for somebody in opiate withdrawal. So it just isn't going to happen. Call your doctor and see. So anyway, he lapses into this really silly explanation here. He says after the opiate and looking up on the computer, he says prior to discharge, there was still Prince and Kirk left around 6:30 because I had picked up my daughter at gymnastics at 6:45 over by Paisley Park. Actually, I just had a frank discussion and stated to Prince and Kirk in the room that Kirk had been a longtime patient of mine, and I don't want to violate trust. Yeah, because he has an issue with, and then he felt like if it could be administered in I wasn't sure that he had an issue with Valium. So Dr. Schulenberg basically is saying he looked up Valium as an opiate withdrawal symptom. He explained to Prince Kirk that there might be issues. We don't know if he gave it IV or not for certain. And I didn't want to lie, so because Kirk's preferences was to not even have the Valium available, which I totally understand. Yeah, because he has an issue with, but felt that it could be administered in I wasn't aware that he had an issue with Valium. Your doctor, do you see what I'm saying? You guys are providing all these drugs and doing all these things and doing all these experiments to make what happen? Concerts? Because they're so worried about Prince Roger Nelson's well-being. And then they talk about it being administered in a supervised setting, the Valium, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, Dr. Schulenberg says, and then that was the last time when they left the office. That was the last time I physically seen Prince. That's what he said. Then they talk about the symptoms of Valium. Pardon me. And then the detective asks if somebody took hydroxine, Valium, and clonidine together, if they could overdose. And he says, well, certainly you could if you intentionally overdosed on all of these. Okay. And then this morning you were going over there. Well, and then I cut you off. No, actually, last night I received a call from Phaedra. Kirk had given her my contact information. I'm just checking, scrolling through his phone. I think it was around 8:30, so 8:17. I don't mind showing you. We had an 11-minute phone call. That's what I'm talking about. Phaedra called and talked to Schulenberg, and then Schulenberg texted Kirk. He said to say, I just talked to Phaedra. Is it legit? But he texted Kirk right around the same time that Phaedra called, so he couldn't have actually had that full-blown conversation with Phaedra at 8:17 and be texting Kirk at 8:17. So because when he texts Kirk, he says, I just talked to Phaedra to make sure it's legit. We discussed that on the slideshow. So then he has the 11-minute phone call. So that would bring us to 8:30. And then he wants us to believe that he went back to bed and didn't see the stare text at 9:38 and then had the phone call at 10:47 with Schulenberg, Phaedra, and Kornfeld. And they brought in the expert to talk to the other expert who was looking up opiate withdrawal symptoms on the computer. Right. That's why they asked if they would be able to do the chemical dependency. And actually, what they were asking is if Michael Schulenberg could prescribe Suboxone, which he said he had not taken the licensing for. I went through that before. So also, in case you missed it, that they said that I was told Dr. Kornfeld might reach out to a doctor in Minnesota who could prescribe anti-withdrawal medications. That's Suboxone, because you have to be specifically licensed to prescribe that, because it really is just heroin in a different form. I have not gone through the training, so I don't prescribe, yada, yada, yada. So when Dr. Kornfeld called, he was looking to make contact with a doctor that would. They talk about out in California. The time being 10:47, as we discussed. So he most certainly would have saw the stare picture from 9:38, as well as the text that say I need back in, as well as the doctor note saying that he threw up and was cold overnight in the 24-hour in-house care. They talk about a bunch of nonsense, you guys, about the flying out, about sending the picture mistakenly, which I'm not going to read all that because we already know that that's a lie. How they couldn't send the records through email. We couldn't conduct or send medical records through email, not to mention I don't have a scanner at the office, Schulenberg said. So that's when I said, I'll just drive over. He said that would be good. Let me know when you're coming. So I texted him. That was probably around 9:30, saying I'll be over in about 10 minutes. Which entrance should I meet you at? And to make a long story short, that's how I ended up at Paisley Park this morning, was simply to drop these records to, smooth the medical transition over to Dr. Kornfeld in California. And then I arrived at the scene that you're now well aware of. So, totally by coincidence. Then he goes on, the thing is, you guys, he said he arrived about 9:30. We discussed on the text that they talk about which gate, the south gate. They both say in both directions, Kirk and Schulenberg, on the 18th and on what the text they provided us the 21st. I need back in. Okay. Now, also, if he arrived at 9:30, like he just said, then clearly we know from Andrew Kornfeld's testimony that that's approximately the time that he said he was left in the room with Marone. Kirk went to go look for Prince, came back, got Marone, and then he heard the scream. That would all be right around the same time that they were all getting there. So you do your research, you just find out that the timeline that they gave, on TV isn't right. So then he goes on, they're going through his phone. He says, did you take pictures of this stuff? I'm pretty cell phone illiterate, he says, I'm sorry. And then it's funny that Schulenberg says this, you guys. He says, the conversations that Kirk and I had back in the fall were also on my cell phone, but that cell phone, unfortunately, took a swim in the Dominican Republic last month and no longer functions. Pretty funny comment to make during a super duper huge investigation, don't you think? It's like kind of like a movie. His cell phone took a swim in the Dominican Republic with a brick attached to it. Just saying. And then they take pictures of the text and the conversation, then they mix them and match them so that we can see them online. And then, of course, they go through how on the 14th that Kirk contacted him asking if Prince could have some pain medication because of his hip. I did feel comfortable issuing some prescriptions because I had evaluated him on the 7th and prescribed 15 Percocet. So there you are, prescribing the Percocet after being told he had an opiate problem. Again, it goes into the flying back on the Atlanta. But the thing is this, you guys, after reading the files, the Bayer bottle in the hospital in Moline, Dr. Mancha says in her file that the Bayer bottle was filled almost up to the rim with pills that were not Bayer, but looked to be hydrocodone, like the one that they sent to the, not the lab, but the pharmacy there in Moline. So no, looks like Vicodin, bring it back, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? Just because they look like it, it doesn't matter. But the fact is they were in the Bayer bottle that was pointed out at the scene as being, this whole big drug thing. And again, as I mentioned before, that's the only time they ever really mention hydrocodone. So because he called to try to get this hip pain medication. That's where that lie was brought in. Because later on, Kirk apologizes and says that he never should have asked for the prescription for Prince in his name. And I've talked about some of it before. Oh, here goes Schulenberg. He apologized that he had asked me to issue a prescription for that and that. He had only just found out and had over the weekend contacted a number of people. He did not tell me specifically who they were, other than he had mentioned an ex-wife who verified potentially, I guess, that Prince had a problem for many years. That would be the 18th and 19th with opiate use. The naproxen, you guys, pain relief. Naproxen provides pain relief and, again, blood flow to organs and does other things. So, then they go on to talk about withdrawals, and he doesn't consider himself an expert in the field of withdrawals, how the doctors changed the lab records. There's virtually nothing in the records but mild anemia. So then why is he being treated with all these drugs? It goes round and round. You know, it's like on the Love Symbol album, it's the Max or the Continent. One of them where they go around on the merry-go-round. It's like riding on a merry-go-round upside down. That's what this is, you guys. So, you know, they talk about the drug screens, and I told you guys before, even where they showed that there was hydromorphone and hydrocodone in his system, what they don't tell you is those levels that they show are below the cutoff points. If you were to go to your doctor and take a drug test, those levels that they show, they would be below the drug cutoff, and they wouldn't even show. But they show them on here because they came from the laced Tylenol and or codeine or Percocet, whichever one he took accidentally, that interacted with the other medication that caused the so-called emergency landing and the medical event. It all goes together, you guys. I'm trying to help you understand. He talks about how he didn't provide any other prescriptions outside of what's been documented in the electronic record, but that's not true because then he prescribed all the CVS pills in Kirk's name, which they don't talk about either. But he said that the Percocet he had noted in the medical file was for back pain, even though Kirk said it was for hip pain. He noted it for back pain. So you got lies all over the place. He said he's known Kirk for 16 years. To the best of my recollection, that's probably the first prescription I wrote for controlled medication. Probably. Who says that? Oh, let's see. More about the electronic charts and names being changed. Again, they talk about the numbness and tingling, and that they try to say that Prince called and had been irritated by the chiropractic manipulation. Now, we don't hear anything about that in the files, and some people might think, why would we? But what's interesting about that, like I said, is because Dan Piepenbring mentioned in the book that Phaedra got a one-time power of attorney to sign the book rights around that time they were doing all that stuff. So I feel like if a notary came to the house and they called it a chiropractor, just stuff that I hear. I don't know. Talks about how nobody's made any threats or promises to him and that he can get a copy of his statement. And they end this statement at approximately 11:30 a.m. on 4/21/16, which I'm sure when I go back and look at Chris Nelson's other files, that will contradict that Chris Nelson being somewhere else at 11:30 interviewing somebody else, probably Kirk Johnson. I believe that's what we looked at yesterday. Everything in these files, you guys, is cut and pasted. Absolutely everything. People asking, is it a conspiracy to murder? You know, what is it? It is, you guys. It's the whole MK Ultra, Ek Center, Eckenkower, Egg, Ek, MK, KKK. It's the hand signal. It's a KKK when you do it sideways. It's MK Ultra, KKK times 3. Monarch programming. It's why the butterflies. I don't come here to play with your mind. I'm coming here to share with you the files, the information that's available time and time again, to share with you that the breakdown, like I just shared on the other temptation video, is certainly in place and it's certainly going to happen. I know people might find it hard to believe that still the story, but the thing is, the Creator had to find a way to expose himself to us because he wants to be known. He deserves to be known. And there are those in the world that don't want him to be known. They don't want us to know how beautiful our DNA is, how divine we are, and how much our Creator loves us. So this huge story has been concocted for this final generation. Every generation has had its righteous people who may have went unrecognized or whatever the case may be, you guys. And what he told me in my life after life was, now is the time that there's going to be a new story written, and it's our story. And the proper people are going to go down in history, and the other ones are just going to go down as part of the breakdown and stay down. They're trying to not receive that punishment, which is why we were forewarned in all these ways. In case you didn't watch the temptation video, what you see back here is the MK Ultra, the X Center, Ekin Kaur. I explained it. In the Hebrew alphabet, Vav, Vav, Vav is 666 because Vav is 6 numerically. So when you take the Vav and you write it upside down, it's the egg. It's la, 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 he, but it's also the M, which is 13 on its side, which is the breakdown. It's 13 times 3, which is 39, which is the opposite upside down of 63, which is how old Prince will be this year. And it's Rekisto, you guys. It's the egg. It's 666. It's 1999, and he forewarned us in every which way that he could without breaking his word contractually. And I'm begging you to listen. I'm praying for you to listen and do your own research. And pray. You guys pray, because we are a generation of people that have had a serious wool pull over our eyes. But don't forget the Creator's in charge, and it's all been done for a reason, so that you can get to know him and invite him to come back. And one day you'll see him the way I did. I think. That's what I'm here for, to make you guys understand this is a plan and to have you research the lie, the all lie in, a lie in, alien, all in. It's Aleister Crowley. It's A-lister crowd. It's alchemy. It's, it is what it is, you guys. They've just hidden themselves really well in big red Pumbaa hats, Kingdom Halls that have $80 million tax-free charities in Canada, which is where Renville is from. His phone records clearly show us that he was involved with Kirk on the 323, 414, 415, and 419. I do have those records available. If you have an email, you want to leave it to me. I have all these on record. If you guys want to leave me your emails or whatever, I'll answer. I'll send them to you. This isn't jive. It's the truth. And I don't know. I can't say it enough. Appreciate you guys watching and listening. Tell me what you want to hear. Ask me your questions. And please share the videos, because ain't no fanking the funk, man. Not let him go down as a washed up singer. You guys are going to listen, and I'm going to keep thanking you for listening. And I'm going to go. I'm going to find an inspiration for my next video to make you understand how much he loves us. And I love you guys too. Thank you for coming and sharing.